Hello, you are listening to or watching Strangers in Space. And for, I don't know, the next half an hour, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, we'll see how it goes. We are going to be reacting to the news that Russell T Davies is coming back to Doctor Who, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm
Matt.
Lee.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Simon.
And yeah, if anybody didn't know what the big news was, the really big news is that Lee is there in the corner of our screen, although probably not for long. I think somebody forgot to pull the flush.
Oi. This is my bedroom.
Also, we have, or I have, come across somebody has posted on the Gallifrey Base forum an apparently leaked email, which we will get to at the end of this in a spoiler section, because if anybody doesn't want to know what the contents of that email was, which includes the name of the 14th Doctor and details about the 60th anniversary special, if you don't want to know, don't listen to the spoiler section at the end. So we will not be talking about that until we get there. And chances are it's not true anyway. But it happened just before we started the call. So we might as well bring it up, right? Because it gives us something to talk about. I asked on Facebook for our listeners to tell us things that they wanted to make sure we didn't miss during the course of this conversation. So I'll go back and forth between the things that they've said and the things that we were going to talk about anyway. And I shall be asking your opinions on the various bits and pieces that we come across. But first of all, Russell T Davies is back in Doctor Who. Lee, you first, because it's been a long time since we've heard your voice. Was that a surprise?
Yeah, absolutely. Unless everybody else seemed to know. Well, everybody seems to know everything before me. But I got really excited and put it up and said, "Hey guys, guess what? You're you're not gonna see this coming." And you all came back and went, "Yeah, we've known for hours, mate." But I was really excited. I was really surprised, but probably the same as everybody else. Just like kind of why, but also yeah. All right then, let's see what happens.
But we get stuck into the whys and wherefores in a minute. Simon, were you surprised?
Yeah. Mostly because there seemed to be a steady opinion that he decided never to come back to the program, and that kind of artistically made sense. You thought, well, he's had his time, he did what he wanted to do, and he's moved on. But when you look at the work that he's done since, you think, yeah, good shout, mate. You had your time, but it was a positive surprise, and I was more excited than I thought I would be. If you'd said it to me a few days ago and said, "What do you think about if RTD came back?" I think I would have said, "I don't know whether it's progress or not." But yeah, no, I was far more excited than I thought I was going to be.
Well, we'll get more to that later on, because we'll have a conversation about the whys and wherefores and everything else, and then we'll sort of maybe leave on the note of whether we're looking actually forward to it, because that's probably the note that we want to leave on. For myself, it was like, bloody hell. And then it was, oh, right, of course. So, yeah, surprise at the moment of hearing the news, followed almost instantly by, a feeling of, right, gotcha. But Matt, how about you?
No, I was expecting it. I wasn't expecting it. I was surprised, but I've read the writer's tale, and I know how burnt out, stressed Russell T Davies. I mean, Russell T Davies only escaped his last show running of Doctor Who with his life, barely up at 2 a.m. smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee to get like episodes out on a deadline. So that surprised me, that he'd want to actually, dive back in to something that he doesn't necessarily fully control. But that will come up later. How much control he's going to have this time?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the first thing that I bring up, basically.
Yeah, and how big a wheelbarrow of cash they've driven to Manchester to park outside of his door.
Well, several of the people who wrote in, including Alistair Thwaite, Matthew Maisie, Ian Charles, asked basically, is this a backward step? David Ewan says, what is the rationale for this? It says beyond the anniversary year 2. So is this an admission of failure for the Chibnall era? Why not the Moff? Is it a back to basics reboot of a reboot? or is he going to take on the continuity of the last several years that he's been absent from? Presumably reboot if he is taking on a new Doctor. Only really Barry Letts has come close to this, albeit very differently. Will it work? It isn't 2005 anymore, and the show hasn't had a break as it had done before 2005 in the reboot. So it's not new, and the world has changed. And who approached him anyway? Luke Hammond says, my immediate thought was, to what extent is this an indication of the strife the BBC feel Doctor Who is in, as asking or even begging Russell T Davies to come back will obviously be seen as a conservative move? Is this a short-term steadying the ship move, or part of a longer-term plan? And how much power in the decision-making will RTD have? And like I say, several people think maybe this is a backward step, or will be seen as a backward step. Will this be seen as an indication that the Chibnall era wasn't thought to have worked, and that the BBC need to go back to the roots that brought Doctor Who back in the first place in 2005, and see if they can recharge the batteries by turning the clock back, 18 years it'll be by the time his new Doctor Who comes to the screen. I, for my part, think that the most interesting thing in the press release, and when I say the most interesting thing, I don't mean the most exciting thing, the most striking thing.
I can now see Lee's head.
Oh,
Keep going.
we've got a
That's
ghost in from the past there. I don't think it's the most striking thing of the press release, but I think the most interesting part of the press release in terms of Doctor Who going forwards is this. It's going to be a co-production between Bad Wolf and BBC Studios, and I bet Matt's begging to talk about this. But here's a bit of background. At the last review of the license fee, something that had been ongoing prior to that was suddenly kicked up a gear. The BBC had agreed with the Conservative government prior to this, at the previous review of the license fee, that certain amount of programming was going to go out to tender. It's been the agreement for many years that part of what the BBC produces has to be produced, part of what the BBC broadcasts has to be produced outside of the BBC, and the BBC have to buy it in. In other words, the government have said you've got to give a level playing field to other production companies to make stuff that you're going to broadcast. At the previous to last license fee review, it was agreed that what the BBC would do was put programs out to tender. In other words, they would say, this tranche of programs are now up for tender. Production companies can make tender, what's the word I'm looking for? They can make tenders, basically, for these programs. And if the offer they make is agreed by the Board of Governors to be better than what the BBC would do themselves, then these independent production companies will be given the right to make these programs. And I think it was 40% of the BBC's programs had to go out to tender. And it could come back that all of them would still be made by the BBC, or all of them would be made independently, and presumably it would come back somewhere in between. At the last license fee review, the BBC had to agree to put all of their programming out to tender, which means that anything that is still made in-house at the BBC had to be put up for a tender agreement where any production company outside the BBC could put in a tender. And if the Board of Governors, which remember is independent of the BBC and exists in order to make sure the BBC are doing the right thing, if that Board of Governors says, well, hang on, we like this tender from this company more than what the BBC are promising to do themselves, the BBC have no power to stop that programme from being made outside of the organisation. The only way the BBC can stop a programme from being made outside the organisation, according to this tender agreement, as I assume it works, is if the BBC have already arranged with an independent company to make that programme for them. Step in Bad Wolf. Bad Wolf, as we know, are a company that were formed out of the previous arrangement for Doctor Who back in 2005 to 2010. This was Jane Tranter, who was in charge of BBC Drama at the time, and Julie Gardner, who was Russell T Davies's co-executive producer, putting together a production company to make various programmes, none of which hitherto have had any involvement from Russell T Davies, insofar as I'm aware, albeit, if I remember rightly, Tranter and Gardner and Russell T Davies made his version of A Midsummer Night's Dream before the Bad Wolf production company was put together, and the Bad Wolf production company was put together off the back of that production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. So essentially, Russell T Davies set up Doctor Who with these two women. They did their time, and afterwards they went their separate ways. Russell T Davies off in one direction, these two women off in another direction. But before they went their separate ways, they made this thing together, A Midsummer Night's Dream, for the BBC, then went their separate ways. Bad Wolf have been making programmes, not a massive amount of programmes, but a certain amount of programming for the last few years. They're a young production company who, you know, they're on the map, but obviously they could be further on the map. And the bigger programmes you make, the more high profile programmes you make, the more companies are going to come to you to make programmes for them. The more high profile programmes you're going to get to make. So doing something like Doctor Who for Bad Wolf is a no-brainer. Bad Wolf would have looked at the situation that the BBC were in this sort of tender agreement situation. They'd have looked at what was going on with Doctor Who, because if you look at Doctor Who, I would suggest that what's been happening is the BBC don't quite know what to do with it. They want to carry on doing it as it has been done for the last 15 years. But they can also see that in the current climate, you can't just go on making it as you have been doing it, because broadcasting is changing. And so Doctor Who needs to change somewhat to keep up with broadcasting. So we don't know the order that these things took place in behind the scenes. Whether we'll ever get to know, who knows? Presumably at some point we'll learn, we'll find out. Who knows? It might all be in the next issue of Doctor Who magazine. The suggestion that most people have been making on social media is that either the BBC came to Russell T Davies in desperation, or Russell T Davies came to the BBC and said, by the way, can my mates have a co-production deal to make this with me, and you can have me if you have them as well. I would suggest, I think the most likely chain of events is that Bad Wolf looked at the situation, said, well, hang on, we could do that. Let's get in touch with the BBC. And I tell you what would really force the issue for us is if we could get our mate Russell T Davies back on board and go to the BBC with Russell T Davies and say, how about a co-production deal with us? So those are the background and my thoughts on the situation. Reverse order, because Matt always has thoughts on this kind of stuff. Matt, what's your view of all of the things that I've just brought up?
I was mad. Yeah, it sounds like Bad Wolf and Russell T Davies came as a package to the BBC and took on Doctor Who. I mean, that's not far off what happened in 2003. Only it was happening individually and kind of within the organisation itself. So, I mean, in a sense, I've got some sympathy for the idea that it is a course correction. That I don't buy into the BBC think Chibnall has been disastrous and are desperate to correct the ship. I think the BBC are probably more likely seeing this as a possible way of capturing lightning in the bottle again, because undeniably when Russell T Davies and probably more importantly Julie Gardner was running Doctor Who, that's when it was hitting the sort of excessive audience figures. That's when it really caught the zeitgeist. And so whether that will happen again, who knows? But I think the BBC are probably seeing this as the best way of doing it, or that's how Bad Wolf will have sold themselves. And Russell T Davies is also, if anything, more high profile than he was in 2003, because It's a Sin was so phenomenally successful, and English Scandal, and years and years less so. But I think It's a Sin. Russell T Davies is now riding high on the wave of popularity and is on a career high. So he's very sellable for something like Doctor Who. So yeah, I think it's a backward step. It's by its very definition, it's a backward step. I think what it looks like and the way it's approached and the way he writes it, that will tell us if it's creatively a backward step. And I hope it isn't. But
yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment. Simon, all the things I said, all the things that Matt has just said about the behind the scenes production, and the fact that I think the most interesting thing is Bad Wolf, because we'll talk again in a minute as well about Doctor Who going forward. But I think this is not, well, Matt used the term course correction. I think it's not necessarily what you might call a course correction, but I think this is the BBC laying out a plan for Doctor Who going forwards. We'll talk about the exact nature of what that plan might be, but do you agree? Do you think this is a shift, a sort of seismic shift in what goes on behind the scenes at Doctor Who? Or do you just think, oh, get Russell T Davies back, that was the obvious thing to do, let's just enjoy that?
I think there's energy passing in all directions here. I think there are things pulling Russell T Davies back to the BBC because they consider him a safe pair of hands, and because of his track record, and as you say, on his new track record, that he will generate an incredible amount of interest both from old fans and new, and that that creates great press. But I also think that this had to be the right deal for him. My gut instinct is that yes, he had decided that he'd had enough of Doctor Who, or that he wouldn't do it again. So for him to come back, I think circumstances have got to change to the extent where he's got enough control that he's not feeling overwhelmed like he was last time. So if you think about Bad Wolf and something like his Dark Materials, I'm assuming that they've generated these 3 series of the program and said to the BBC, we will have these ready on this date, and this date. So in some respects, they are dictating when the product is ready, and I think that is a really healthy thing, particularly for Doctor Who, that a product won't appear until it's ready. So in the same way as that Brexit and what have you is affecting just business in general, consumers, that we are now in the middle of a buyer's market where I think I'm right in saying that. Oh, maybe I got that wrong. This is embarrassing on YouTube. I know there's been a shift in power between buyer and seller, in as much as there aren't as many, because we're not getting as much stock into the country. So in the same way, the BBC isn't having the same amount of control as it had. The government have said, no, you've got to put this stuff out to tender, and therefore they are going to have to hand over 99% of the creative product to somebody else to create, and they're going to have to wait until that's ready from those people.
But I think, and choosing who to do it with and how plays into the BBC's hands and gives them more control than would otherwise be the case. Matt had his hand up first.
Yeah. So it's basically what happened in the 1980s under Thatcher. So this is exactly so. BBC programs were sort of put out for sort of co-distribution deals and things like that. I also think that Simon's comment about it has to be where Russell T Davies is in his life is an interesting one, and I think that's really correct. That is true. I think the 3 or 4 things that Russell T Davies has done since leaving Doctor Who is probably what Russell T Davies was craving doing when he was doing Doctor Who, and now he's done them, and he feels that he is in a position, possibly in his personal life as well. He's not moving to America anymore. He's based in the UK. He's done his sort of unofficial spiritual sequel to Queer as Folk, which he always wanted to do. So maybe it's time for him to come back for a bit more Doctor Who.
I suspect there's something a bit more. We'll come to what I think, because I've put this down a list of 6 topics to cover, and this comes under one of the other topics, so we'll get there. But Lee, you had your hand up, plus any thoughts on what we've said about this part of it so far?
It's been fascinating to hear all this, and I agree with it all. It sounds pretty rational, everything you're saying, apart from Matt. But generally speaking, Generally speaking, the world has changed massively, hugely. In fact, we don't recognise the world. If we were to go back in 2005, we would never know what was coming. We wouldn't even predict it. It would be on the survivors level of kind of sci-fi heading our direction, which we didn't know was going to come. And it's changed the landscape, the world, but it's also it changed the way we watch TV. So it's forced us to watch it in a completely different way. And Russell T Davies is a canny guy who always seems to be on the mark, on the button with whatever is happening right now. As you know, he taps into feelings and security and characterizations and people, and he brings all of that into everything he writes. I mean, everything he writes is of the time. You go and watch The Second Coming, it's not of this time, it's of that time. And he's always said, I don't care if it looks dated, it's going to happen now. So he's the right person to kind of come in and give it another crack, and it won't be the show that he started out doing. So he is effectively coming back in to play with a show that, yeah, he's created, but has changed so much since he's been in. He has to adapt it to the way that TV's going, secure its future, because I think that's one of the reasons why he's on board, is to make sure that Doctor Who does not disappear. If it has to change its format and the way that we download it and watch it and all these other things, whether or not he sends off about 16 different spin-offs, however it's going to work, he will secure Doctor Who's future again. I think that's possible. It's possible that the BBC were thinking, yeah, they are a little bit worried about the Chibnall era, but I don't think they're that worried that they're going to just bring RTD to save the day. Like JR said, it makes perfect sense, business sense about the tendering, that it happens to fall into Bad Wolf's hands. It happens to be RTD's on board. Yes, that sounds great. Bring him back in. He's a very clever man. We're a very clever corporation. Let's see how Doctor Who will fit and work in the future. And, of course, RTD has got absolutely no qualms in bringing whatever characters from all races, creeds, nations, sexuality. He doesn't care. He's going to bring everything in. And for the fans that have been complaining about it so far, just wait. It's going to be very different. But it's going to be, I think, a very interesting and fun show again, but not probably in the way that the 2005 show was. At least I don't think so.
It's difficult to tell if Lee's seeing RTD as the Messiah or the fifth horseman of the apocalypse.
Mate, when he first got the job, and I saw, we were all worried, and we read the first interview in Doctor Who magazine. He was like really cheery. It's going to be brilliant, and I was like, oh. And then I had a dream about him, and it was a lovely dream.
I don't want to know about this. Speaking of lovely dreams.
So yeah, he's a Messiah.
Speaking of lovely dreams, Tim Hull says, "Dear God, please not Ollie Alexander. He was brilliant in It's a Sin, but he's not a Doctor Who." So a couple more comments. Point being, Russell T Davies said in an interview that he thought Ollie Alexander from It's a Sin would make a brilliant Doctor Who. Now, kind of the point is, Russell T Davies might think Ollie Alexander might make a brilliant Doctor Who, but when he says would make, he doesn't necessarily mean would make right now. He might mean would make in 10 or 15 years after he's done a bit more acting and got a bit more experience. He might also mean Ollie Alexander would make a good Doctor Who, but so would 1,500 other actors who I also can see in my head as the next Doctor Who. It just so happened that he was talking about Ollie Alexander. So all this fuss about the fact that Russell T Davies has said Ollie Alexander would make a good Doctor Who does not mean that Ollie Alexander is Russell T Davies's first and only choice for a Doctor Who. To wit, Daniel West says, if ever there is going to be a one-year-only superstar Doctor, this must be the best chance. And he's referring to the fact that in the press release, it says Russell T Davies will be back to celebrate the 60th anniversary and, quote, series going forward, unquote. In other words, there's a kind of ambiguous way of phrasing it there that makes it sound like maybe Russell T Davies is just doing one, or maybe he's doing several series going forward, but it's hard to say from the way it's phrased. Anthony Williams says, and I don't think this is right at all, but nevertheless, my call is that he'll bring back Tennant as a one-shot 14th Doctor, revisiting an old favourite, as the curator hinted he might. So, Ollie Alexander for the Doctor, Hugh Grant for the Doctor, famously Hugh Grant. Okay, Lee, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but I'm thinking the hair. If he keeps the hair, he's in.
Lee's very sensitive about hair.
Remember, Russell T Davies famously said he wished he'd cast Hugh Grant, and Hugh Grant would have done it if he'd have known it was just going to be for 1 year back in 2005. Potentially, this could be 1 year. We'll talk about what we think of whether it will be 1 year or more or whatever in a moment. I have suggested in the past that you could cast a Doctor for a special and have them then regenerate within the first 15 hours of their regeneration. That rule set out in the Christmas Invasion. And you don't lose a body, as it were, but you get the chance to stunt cast somebody absolutely astonishing for 60 minutes before coming to the regular Doctor afterwards. And I suggested potentially Russell T Davies could do Hugh Grant, especially after having now done the English Scandal, and then cast somebody as the proper ongoing 14th Doctor at the end of the special to have after the special. So that's another possibility. Russell T Davies had recently worked with both of the Doctors he cast back in 2005 and 2006. So Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant. There's a suggestion that probably, therefore, he'd cast somebody he has recently worked with again, maybe. We'll talk, at the end of this episode when we get into what I've called, I suppose, the spoiler section about the actual rumour that is doing the rounds. But let's just very briefly, Ollie Alexander, Hugh Grant, something like either of those two, if we hadn't heard this rumour, if we weren't going to talk about this rumour, likelihood of either of these things, would any of you like to see either of these actors? Simon, would you like to see Hugh Grant for a one-off special, Ollie Alexander for a series, something like that, anything like that, those two actors?
Other way around, I'd like more Hugh Grant, less Ollie Alexander. If I'm honest, I did enjoy his performance in Years and Years. I don't feel it's the right time for him. I'd like to see how he progresses. Yeah. There are other actors. I was chatting to Matt how much I adore Brett Goldstein at the moment, and the chances of him being the Doctor would be, oh God, that would just be amazing. I just think it would be amazing. And then still Sally Hawkins as well. But her working with RTD would be a dream. I think that would work really well. But
let's not go into that whole big, because this is an hour-long conversation about who would we want. I'm really just talking.
I'd like to think he would cast the net wider and maybe look outside of the obvious and the ones, as you say, the ones that have been within his field of vision recently. Although there are some great actors to pick from.
Yeah. Matt, do you think it's likely he'll do what he did before? Choose somebody he's worked with?
I think it's likely. I think the good thing about Russell T Davies is he's more so even than Stephen Moffat or Chris Chibnall. People seem to want to work with him. So he could. So Sally Hawkins potentially could want to work with Russell T Davies. She works with Ken Loach, so why not Russell T Davies? I'm not a big fan of the idea of stunt casting someone like Hugh Grant. I think one of the best things about Doctor Who, particularly with David Tennant and Matt Smith, is it's a star maker. So you cast someone who's right at the beginning of their career, who's potentially, and if you cast them right, they're potentially going to go on to make feature films, and you get them just at that point. And I think both Russell Davies and Stephen Moffat have had the skill in doing that. So it's that sort of name. It's a sort of name that's just on the edge of our awareness, but won't be in like 7 years' time. It will be, they'll be stratospheric. And I don't think Hugh, and I think doing that from the start for me is important. I think that's the thing that will grab viewers' attention.
This is the point.
New.
This is the point I was going to make, is that it has to be someone new, but it has been someone new each of the last 4 times. The thing that drew people's attention in 2005 was they hadn't seen Doctor Who as an ongoing series for 16 years. The thing that drew people's attention 4 years ago, was that they hadn't seen a woman play the Doctor. But I think if Russell T Davies is going to make Doctor Who the water cooler thing that he did in 2005, then his first episode back has to have something astonishing in it. And by astonishing, I mean somebody like Robert Pattinson. And Robert Pattinson is not going to stick around in Doctor Who for a whole year. I think you've got to do something in that special that makes everybody sit up and take notice. And I don't think multiple Doctors in a special is enough, because everybody saw that in the Day of the Doctor, and you can watch it on iPlayer any day of the week. There has to be something in that first episode back for Russell T Davies that makes the world sit down and go, oh my God.
But I think that's Russell T Davies.
I
think Russell T Davies coming back, I think his name now is big enough after the work he's done to at least attract attention. I mean, look at what the announcement of him taking over as a showrunner has done on social media. And it's not just fans of social media.
Fans,
it's hit the name. And yes, Matt Smith and David Tennant didn't create like a massive impact when their names were cast, but it became very clear very quickly that they were big stars. They were potential big stars waiting to be. And I think that's the impact that he'll try to make. I think he'll have like big names in it. But I think with the series in general, it's this idea that it is a star maker, that it is introducing this new person. I mean, whether he'll do that or not, I don't know. I mean, he might cast, I don't know, Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise secretly really wants to work with Russell T Davies. I'm not interested in that.
I just think Russell T Davies is a sucker for the hype, and I don't think "Hi, I'm Russell T Davies and I'm back" is anywhere near hype enough for him. I think he'll want to do something that blows people's brains, and I don't think casting an up-and-coming name as the Doctor is going to be enough to do that, frankly. I don't know, Lee, what do you think? You've not spoken on this one yet.
What are you asking me?
Well, whether you think it's likely that Russell T Davies will cast an up-and-coming actor, or whether he'll do something. I don't know what.
Yeah, I agree with Matt in a way that I do think it's always been a bit of a star maker. You look at Tom Baker and Peter Davison and all these other people that have been in the role since 2005. Every single one of them, apart from Christopher Eccleston, have been projected somewhere bigger for some time since. And I don't know, that Ollie chap, what's his name again? Ollie Alexander. I like him actually. He's got a good face. He's got charm. He's got a bit of humour. He moves well. I think he can be moulded really well. It could be the next Matt Smith. I would prefer him definitely to Hugh Grant. I don't want any no offence to Hugh if you're watching, mate, but I'm kind of a bit sick of you now. So maybe just stop acting. But
Hugh Grant is just an example, Lee. I gave another example, Robert Pattinson.
Hugh Grant's on a real career, a really interesting period in his career. Everything he's done in the last 5 years has been great. Just saying. Yeah. And I'd also like to say I'm not that interested in Alexander because I didn't like him in It's a Sin particularly. I thought he was a little bit cringeworthy in It's a Sin.
Yeah, but
I'm on my own in that.
Isn't that supposed to be him as a character? I don't know, but I don't know. I haven't seen him in anything else. It'd be interesting to see what else he did. But I have to say, with the Matt Smith reveal at the time, he was 25, 26, and we were looking at him going, who's this? Who's this guy? He's got good fingers, isn't he? His fingers is good, and his hair's good, isn't it? And that's about as much as we all had to play with. And maybe, just maybe, well, I hope that RTD does something similar. I don't want it to pull in a name. I don't like the idea of stunt casting. I think that'd be rubbish. And I think you're right, though, JR, that whoever is the Doctor, the actual episode or the series needs to be surrounded with the star cast. That would work better. Otherwise, you end up going down a bit of a JNT route, and you don't want to start casting end up here.
Russell T Davies was JNT from the start. Russell T Davies was the guy who faked a regeneration at a cliffhanger in the middle of a series in order to get people to come back and make it the #1 program the following week.
But not really in casting his leads. Russell T Davies, if you look at the series, I mean, yes, an English Scandal, he cast Hugh Grant, but at that point, Hugh Grant was sort of waning. This was at the start of Hugh Grant's renaissance as an actor. So Russell T Davies isn't known for star vehicles. He's known for casting character
his
actors.
first Doctor Who was Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was but that's a gesture as much
Yeah.
as anything else. It's a great piece of casting, but it's also a gesture. You know, it's something to make the public sit up and go, oh, that's not what I expected. I'm going to have to tune in to find out how that works. And that's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. When Russell T Davies does whatever he does for the 60th, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it's Russell T Davies. He's going to do something that makes us go, oh, that's not what I had in mind. That's not what I expected. How is that going to work? I've got to tune in to find out. But let's move on, because we've already been going for 35 minutes and we're only 2 out of the 6 subjects down. Rod Brown, how much do you think RTD will revisit his own era of the show, or will it be a completely new take? Matthew Maisie, I can see the sense in going for the proven success, not that I personally want it to be much the same as the original RTD years. I hope RTD wants to come at it fresh too. George Machin, I can't help but feel slightly disappointed, as I was looking forward to seeing a brand new voice take the show over, but perhaps it's been long enough that RTD will have a different take on the show. That's not to say his original take was bad, but I would hope we aren't about to witness an attempt to replicate his original era. And Tim Ullman says, on a slightly unrelated but slightly related question, will it be 6 episodes, 10, 12, 13? So my question is this. Let's not talk about the 60th for a minute, but let's talk about what happens in 2024, because what happens in 2024 is going to be about Doctor Who going forward. The 60th is about something else. So let's talk about 2024, and let's leave what happens after 2024 aside for 1 minute, but let's talk about just 2024. Does Russell T Davies sit down and do a 13 episode series with, 7 single episodes and 3 two-parters in the same way as he did before? Does he do something else entirely? Will he do a 5-day week, a bit like he did with Torchwood Children of Earth? Will he surprise us all with something completely different altogether? Will he have a doctor and a companion plus a hanger-on who's there for some episodes and not other episodes? Will there be a potential romance between the doctor and the companion? Will the companion's growth be something that happens through their journeys with the Doctor in the TARDIS? Will he, in other words, replicate the emotional journey that Doctor Who was between 2005 and 2009? Or will he rethink and reinvent that too? Are we expecting something radically different from what went before? Are we expecting something really the same as what went before? Is that why he's coming back? To try and get lightning to strike twice? Are we expecting something in between? Because for me, I would hope that we would get something radically different. I'm not sure if I'm expecting that, but I would certainly hope we would. And I imagine the truth will probably fall somewhere in between. But Lee, what are your hopes and what are your expectations for what that series in 2024 might actually look like?
Well, the first episode has got to be called Lightning in a Bottle now, isn't it? That's been said a few times. We're all fans, right? So we speculate a lot. It's quite fun to do that, and I like doing it and the predictions and things. But you have to kind of put, like we've done today, you've put it all into you've put it all ready to roll forwards, right? You've got RTD, you've got Bad Wolf TV, you've got the way we watch television now and the way that TV has changed, and we won't be watching it the same anymore. I don't think we're going to get weekly installments unless it's on like a BritBox or Netflix or whatever new platform.
But I'm talking about 2024.
I am, 2024. Yeah. I mean, if you look how different the world has changed in the last year with
the
TV
BBC
watching.
Are going to be broadcasting Doctor Who in 2024.
Yeah, but the public dictate the way they watch things. So we have all changed the way we watch, and especially the younger people who are now going to end up becoming the ones that have the power eventually of your time watching things. Look at TikTok, 2 seconds. So you've got to capture all those people. So he's got a hard task to do that. Now the only way I can imagine this. Well, not the only way, obviously there's millions of ways, but one of the ways I can imagine this working is the fact that we've got a timeless child strand, whether that's tied up at the end of the Chibnall series or not. There is an option now to completely and utterly start from fresh we don't know where the Doctor's come from. He's falling through a hole. It could be a mirror dimension, whatever. It only needs to take our Doctor to go back through that hole, through Alice through the Looking Glass, to have a mirror world exactly the same, but not with the Doctor's past in it. So you could have a fresh start. You could have people not experiencing aliens on Earth. They could all be the same people, the same kind of level of civilization. Gallifrey could be slightly tweaked, so you could have nicer Gallifreyans. The Master could be a replacement Doctor by accident. He doesn't really want to be, but he is. There's all kinds of things you can play with just by moving sideways.
Is what you're saying.
Sorry?
Multiverse is what you're saying.
Oh, no, not multiverses, but just one. So, because
I'm talking, Lee, about will it be 10 episodes or 6 or 13? Will it be one story across the entire series or a bunch of different ones?
This is my point. The point is, how long's a piece of bloody string? We don't know what the landscape's going to look like until 3 years' time. Depending on what story he wants to tell, he will tell it in the best way possible in the amount of minutes he has to tell it. So Torchwood, Children of Earth, was perfect, that length. If it was 6 hours, it would have been too long. If it had been 3 hours, it would have been too short. It was just about right. And a lot of his Doctor Who, back in 2005 onwards, some of his episodes could have been lost and you would never miss them, to be honest. So actually he had a couple of episodes like flim-flamming around that he didn't really need to play with. So 11 episodes might be better for him. Whereas Stephen Moffat seemed to do better, I think, seemed to cram more stuff in the time he had. So I don't know. I think it all depends on how we're watching things in the future, what he's going to be given to play with, the budget, everything I've just said basically is going to come into play by 2024, and I don't think it's going to be what we're used to.
Matt.
So I think you can predict some things. First of all, I'd say Russell T Davies doesn't need a multiverse to make changes. He'll just make them. I don't think he needs the Timeless Children as a kind of a get out for changing Gallifrey or anything like that.
Just very quickly, it's now part of canon, so use it.
But he can abandon it.
Yeah,
it's Lee is notoriously preoccupied with continuity. So
get rid of it.
Yeah. I think 2024 isn't that far away. I think things like Line of Duty, Vigil are being shown once a week, and they're the things that are capturing the public's imagination. So I think absolutely Doctor Who will try to emulate that.
Plus,
I think Doctor
Marvel
Who will definitely
doing that
try
too. Yeah,
Marvel are doing that, and Russell T Davies did that as well. So I don't think this is going to be a series that's going to be released all at once on the BBC iPlayer at the same time as being shown once a week. I think it is going to be kind of delayed gratification. I think we know that one of the great things about Doctor Who is it's telling different stories. It's an anthology series. So whether that takes place within a strong arc or not is kind of a moot point. It's definitely going to be different stories within a series.
I would just make one addendum to that point, is that if Russell T Davies does do just 1 year, he might decide to do one story across 1 year to then leave the door open for somebody else to go back to anthology afterwards. If it's a 1 year deal, and we don't know, and we'll talk about, but that's a potentiality.
But my instinct is, if Russell T Davies is given 1 year to make Doctor Who, he'll have a number of stories that he'll have pent up that he'll want to tell rather than one. And I think that's one characteristic of Doctor Who that I think he abides by. You were talking about what the focus of a series is. I think Russell T Davies's point when he started in 2003 that the companion is the most important thing in the series, I don't think that will have changed. I think he'll still see that it's a series where the companion is critical and at the heart of the series, and death is at the heart of the series. So we know that these things are inviolable for Russell T Davies's Doctor Who. So we can predict certain things. I'm torn between, I don't want a reboot, a complete reboot, because Russell T Davies has done that before. So ironically, on this occasion, a reboot is something that I've seen before. So I'd want something, a sort of a refresh of the series, but one that does kind of draw in elements of Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who, because that would feel, even though it's drawing in elements from the past, that would feel fresh and new. There's only so many times you can reboot something before the rebooting itself feels like a cliche and feels stale and feels like you've been pushed back on the snakes and ladders board to the starting square again. So I don't want to see Rose. I don't want to see Gallifrey disappear. I'd like to see Russell T Davies's take on Gallifrey, or I'd like to see some of the mythology brought in. I'd like to see more of Russell T Davies when he realised that people were now watching Doctor Who, where he could bring Davros in and not necessarily explain who he was. I want to see that, but I'm also worried about that because that in itself is a step back. This is the contradiction of bringing Russell T Davies in. It is going to be a step back, and I'm fascinated and slightly frightened of seeing how he's going to contend with that.
Simon, Russell T Davies, do you expect the Russell T Davies of 2005 or a very different Russell T Davies?
As Matt inferred near the beginning of the podcast, he is a creative writer. We're talking about moving on in the creative process. I don't think he'll necessarily want to recreate what he did before. I think he'd be bored with that. And let's not forget that something has drawn him back to this project. I know that some people online were instantly giving the little emoji hand that it's all about money. I think people who aren't creative seem to think that that is the be all and end all, that somehow that trumps why you want to do a project, because it's got to work for you. You've got to be able to see yourself being able to fulfill that without it being a complete nightmare. So there's got to be enough creatively and enough control here for RTD to go back to it and fall back in love with it. And I think at his core, RTD's a traditionalist. I think the core elements of Doctor Who will stay there, as Matt was saying. You're going to have the TARDIS, you're going to have a companion, you're going to have death, you can have the Daleks, all that stuff will be there at its core, as it always has been, and I think it will continue as an anthology series because that's the way it's been, and that's the series that he fell in love with. So I think he'll carry on with that. As to whether, as far as number of episodes, who knows? I do wonder whether Bad Wolf will make a pitch and say, tell you what we'll do, we'll deliver 10 really great hour-long episodes each year for you for the next 2 or 3 years. And that's what the BBC agrees to, but I don't think there's any practical reason why it has to be exactly the same shape it was before. But I do think that called anthology thing of having different stories will be in place because that keeps things interesting. And yeah, money is important. Money is important, and I imagine he's being paid a decent amount to get him to draw him back to it. But I don't think it's the be all and end all. I just think people got lives to live. I mean, I think he's been through enough in his personal life that, he knows the balance of things and what things are worth chasing. And I think we have to be grateful that he still loves the series because, sometimes people get burnt out. And and as we've read, he did get burnt out. But for him to want to step back into the arena, I think things have got to be different enough to get him back there. I really do.
Well, on those subjects, Harry Whitley says, do you suspect he's going to be writing and producing or just producing? And do you think there's a risk of the reunion thing that you get with bands reuniting after years apart? Hey, Simon, you know all about music analogies that sometimes struggle to bring back the magic. And Harry says, not Genesis, of course. They'll be incredible, obviously, which kind of suggests to me that there's an invitation waiting, an intervention waiting to happen there. Trust me to fluff the punchline, eh? What I would say, if Russell T Davies has the enthusiasm to do something a bit different, that mitigates against the reunion thing being something that, just feels flat and a waste of time. So I suspect it won't be the same thing, and that will make it feel like a different era than the first Russell T Davies era, just coming back for more. But on Harry's question, do you suspect he's going to be writing and producing or just producing? This was what I said on Twitter earlier. I wonder if Russell T Davies's deal will be to come in, do whatever it is for the 60th, do a series in 2024, and then step back and become part of the setup with Julie Gardner and Jane Tranter, and become one of the, I'd phrased it, the new three who rule. In other words, Davies, Gardner, Tranter are in charge of overseeing things, but somebody else comes in to become the showrunner under them. So somebody else is running Doctor Who and possibly spin-offs in a sort of Marvel multiverse, whatever, instead as well. But Russell T Davies himself will step back and he'll just be giving green lights to decisions or red lights to decisions, but he won't actually be the one whose imagination is coming up with the questions that those decisions need to be made about. Simon, we were with you. Does that sound likely? Do you think Russell T Davies would want to do more, or do you think he'd want to just do a year and then disappear altogether? Do you think he'd want an ongoing connection with the program in the way I've suggested?
I would. Very hard to say. It really is hard to say.
True.
But because I imagine if he has ideas bubbling under of what he wants to do with the series, it's going to take more than 1 year to do it. I would have thought. Who knows? I couldn't honestly answer it. Yeah, it makes sense in my head because do you remember those rumours we had at the time of Capaldi? The idea that Capaldi would stop being the doctor and would move into the background and become a producer, and that seemed like a feasible and good idea at the time as well. So why not with RTD? But equally, he may, there's other things he wants to do. He's obviously not prolific. But he's not prolific, but he's constant. There's always something happening that he's working
having said that, in the last 10 years, Russell T Davies has only actually written something like 30 episodes of television. So it's not like he's like super prolific now as he was when he was first doing Doctor Who. And a lot of that is because he's setting up different programs. And so obviously it takes a lot longer to set up new programs than it would if you could just sit down and write the same program for 10 years in a stretch. So that's part of that equation too. But my point is, Russell T Davies was doing Doctor Who originally when he was 45. Now he's going to be turning 60 just before the 60th anniversary. Russell T Davies was born 6 months before Doctor Who started, or 8 months before Doctor Who started. He's a different person. He's a different age. He'll have a different energy. So I just see it maybe, and you talk about the fact that he would have had ideas about what he wants to do. I'm not entirely sure that goes without saying. If Bad Wolf approached him, they might have said to him, what would you do if you came back to Doctor Who for a year? So he might have an idea about what he wants to do. Do you know what I mean? So it could be. Anyway, Lee, what do you think about that? Russell T Davies, 1 year, and then step back to an overseeing role, 1 year and out, or several years? I don't know.
No, it sounds like that does sound right to me. I mean, 1 year in, writing, having other writers on board, possibly in a similar way to before, where he oversees it all and he gets writers in. So it would make sense to continue that as is. But like you say, it's the three who rule. At the end of it all, you've got Bad Wolf running Doctor Who. So he doesn't have to be the showrunner all the time, but like you say, he can green light and red light things. And I think he'd
like
really
he did
enjoy.
with Torchwood.
Yeah, he'd really enjoy that. Exactly. I think it'd be much better for him because he can go on and do other projects. But between the three of them, they can discuss it and say, well, Doctor Who's heading this way. The showrunner wants to do this. What do we think? Get everybody in a room, discuss it, and off they go. I think that's probably the best way. You do need a few more people who love the series and who are really ingrained in the industry to know and make those decisions sensibly. And they all do. They all know it brilliantly, and they brought it back and it was a success. So I don't know, I think it's looking pretty rosy ahead of time. But yeah, I don't think he's going to stick around. They may even create writing teams in the future, but I suppose that's another conversation.
Matt, I mean, because for one thing, go on.
No, go on. No. So I think initially I thought no. Initially I read the statement and I thought he's going to be back for series plural. I still think that might be the case, but I think you're right that I can't see him writing like he wrote before for more than a year or two, probably a year. I think it's going to be a Killing Eve situation where you have
Yeah, yeah.
one creative writing voice and a strong production team, and then that creative writing voice, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, then ascends to a production level, and they bring in another writing voice, and that way you can get a cycle of not new writers but new voices into the series. And I think that's a very exciting thing, because you never quite know what's going to happen next, what the tone is. But on a sort of an arching creative level, there's always going to be stability. And again, that's Bad Wolf. I do think that's likely because I think, as we were talking, I think Bad Wolf and Russell T Davies came to the BBC as a package, and I doubt they would have sold themselves just for some specials in 1 year.
No.
I don't think the BBC is going to think in short term like that. So I suspect that Russell T Davies is going to be involved in some way with Bad Wolf, not with the BBC.
Yeah.
Bad Wolf's going to insulate Russell T Davies from the BBC, allow Russell T Davies, if he wants, to make Queer as Folk 3. At the same time, I'm quite interested in it allows Russell T Davies to make kids TV again, because I wouldn't watch it, and I didn't particularly watch Sarah Jane, but I know how important the Sarah Jane adventures were to a generation of kids growing up, and I don't think they've got the same thing at the moment, as far as I can tell. I mean, I might be out of the loop.
Well,
But-
Russell T Davies did do stuff for CBeebies. He did
Yeah.
Old Jack's Boat. So, yeah, he's not entirely left that sort of behind. In fact, skewed even younger than he ever had done before.
But with Bad Wolf doing that as well,
Mm.
because Bad Wolf I assume, isn't just going to do Doctor Who. It's a production company. So we're then talking about, yes, spin-offs, but also, other projects for Russell T Davies to work on.
Well, Leo Collett says, for the 60th, I'd like some kind of multi-Doctor mini-series with McGann, Tennant, Smith, Capaldi and Whittaker, basically anyone who still looks more or less the same and is likely to do it, 1 episode each before teaming up at the finale. In other words, a mini-series in 2023, which I don't think is likely, but that's very similar to an idea I had for the 50th that I talked about. Peter Nolan says, I don't believe Russell T Davies will make the 14th's first story a multi-Doctor story. So he says how to create that anniversary feel. He does seem to love the Timeless Children concept. So maybe a Where It All Began story of a one-off Doctor's final adventure before they regenerate into Hartnell might accomplish that as the 60th anniversary special. Yeah, I don't think either of those things in themselves are likely. But the reason I've read them out is to say, okay, the 60th anniversary. Now let's talk about what happens in 2023. Do we see it as 1 episode? Do we think there'll possibly even be will Russell T Davies take over from the Christmas special 2022 maybe? Because the last Chibnall special is going to be in October of 2022. So there's room there for a Christmas or New Year's special in between then and the 60th anniversary. So do we see Russell T Davies doing 2 specials, maybe more specials, maybe a mini-series? What do we think? Will it be a multi-Doctor story? Should it be something else? Is there something else that you can do that isn't a multi-Doctor story that's more than just the Christmas Invasion Part 2? This is the 60th anniversary, after all. It's an anniversary special rather than just an introduction, as Peter Nolan says. So, Matt, you look like you're begging to say something, but...
Well, only that we've spent the past few months explaining how unimportant the 60th anniversary is, and that how it probably won't be that critical. But now Russell T Davies is coming back, then actually, and now they're talking about it, then obviously...
We know that something's happening, yeah.
Obviously, that's an excuse, and I think it's going to be more than the 2. How was the 2 Doctors framed? Wasn't it the 100th Target novel or something like that?
Yeah,
There's sort of shoot on it. I suspect it's going to be more than that. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm a fan, so I'd love to see a multi-Doctor story. I like multi-Doctor stories. I'd love to see Paul McGann come back, because he's still got it, and he's still, enough in the public eye. He's still a high profile enough actor to draw people in. Do I think that should happen? I don't know. I mean, I'd be quite happy to see Russell T Davies and a new Doctor hitting the ground running. I think that would be fine as a celebration. A new Doctor is a celebration in itself.
We did talk about the fact that the 60th anniversary could just be the start for a new Doctor, but we did say that would be the first episode of a series to broadcast in the autumn of that year or something along those lines. They are talking in this press release about the 60th anniversary being something to, quotation marks, celebrate, unquote. So the 60th special will be presumably something different. I'd like to see something very different. I'd like to, not necessarily what Peter Nolan said, but I'd certainly like them to think outside the box for it. I don't know. Simon, have you any thought? No, I tell you what, let's go to Lee first, because he seems to be doing everything he can to distract us. Let's get him to actually talk for a minute, and maybe he'll shut up with that bottle.
Least forgotten he's on YouTube, basically. It's just thank God he's not naked right now.
Only from the waist down.
Thank God he's not naked from the waist down. Are you telling me that's the colour of your skin that we can see in your shoulders?
He's wearing a crop top.
It's cold. Yeah, 60th, eh? We don't know, do we? Come on, what are we doing? This is a silly game to play. This is RTD. He's going to pull the rug from underneath our feet and do something amazing. It'd be a musical. So we don't know, do we? I mean,
I'm asking you what you'd like to see.
Just one point. RTD isn't a magician. He doesn't do what we don't expect. RTD, when he was doing Doctor Who, he was I can't remember him shocking or surprising me. I mean, he did a few things as stunts.
Space Pig.
But it's not. Well, yeah, okay.
But in the big ways,
he wasn't sort of inventive with the format, or he didn't make concept Doctor Who like Heaven Sent. He made Midnight, and that was about as conceptual as he got.
He was the showrunner who made the same series of Doctor Who 4 years in a row.
But Stephen Moffat did such an incredible job. He's going to have a massively hard task to follow. So he's going to have to do something that's the polar opposite of trend. But the thing is, he won't do that because it's RTD. He'll make it bigger. Because at the end of every season, when he was in charge, it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, it wasn't just a Dalek. It was Daleks inside me. It wasn't just Daleks inside me. It was the whole universe. It was, you know, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So
are you getting this, Russell?
Go bigger, RTD. How big can you go? I don't know what to expect. I'm just going to close my mind to it and be surprised.
All right, Simon, do you have any expectations or hopes for the 60th?
I think he could possibly steer away from the multi-doctor and do something strong and experimental story-wise. So he could focus on the Timeless Child thing. If the actor that is being bandied around is the case, the kind of subtitle of the Timeless Child fits in with that actor perfectly, I think, in a funny way. So it could be quite a gorgeous story. You know, it could be almost, as you say, an origin story, but open up more ideas. But equally, you know, it could bring back a load of companions. Just bring back loads of people from the past and just have the Doctor retreading their past, but not necessarily faces, because we've kind of done that. I know we like multi-Doctor stories, but that could be mid-season. You know, why not do that mid-season like the Two Doctors? Only good. So I just think there are more possibilities than just the obvious. And I think Day of the Doctor is strong mainly because of its limitations, that it didn't do that Steve Moffat couldn't quite do what he wanted to do, get Eccleston in and things like that, you know, and had to create this new Doctor. And then we got John Hurt. You know, we had one of these amazing actors you were saying about Hugh Grant. So bringing somebody in because it's needed, but not for the sake of it. So
we certainly won't be seeing Eccleston in the 60th, will we, with Russell T Davies doing it?
I don't know the politics of that, but I would just like to see a really, really rich story, because I think Stephen Moffat's got it sewn up as far as a clever story. But let's not say it couldn't be another one, but I think a really strong emotional story to mark the occasion would be really, really great.
I think we need a pantomime horse in it as well.
The Merker.
Yeah, why not? Bring it back.
Ian Charles, and we've kind of covered this bit already, but it was my sixth topic, so let's carry on into it regardless, because I said so. Ian Charles says, it does seem there must be concern in the BBC with the show's recent performance for them to have looked to a safe pair of hands. However, it also suggests the BBC sees a longer-term future, with the rumours of a long-term rest seeming wrong. Although, to be fair, if there's no series now until 2024 after the one we're about to get, which presumably is going to start at Halloween this year, that means there'll be a 2.5 or 3 year gap between series. So there will be a kind of a rest, despite the fact that there will be a handful of specials in between. So we're sort of getting a rest and sort of not getting a rest. But yeah, what Ian Charles says, the BBC seeing a long-term future, that's kind of my sixth topic. We'll come back to that in a second. James Courtney pointed out what Russell T Davies said in January of this year. As it turns out, he was talking to Waitrose Weekend, although this was reposted everywhere, including by clickbait sites like the Radio Times. He said, I was in the middle of running an empire, and my God, I did that 10 years too soon, didn't I? There should be a Doctor Who channel now. You look at those Disney announcements of all those new Star Wars and Marvel shows, you think we should be sitting here announcing the Nyssa adventures or the return of Donna Noble, and you should have the 10th and 11th Doctors together in a 10-part series. Genuinely. He says you laugh, but did Star Trek fans ever think they'd be getting a Captain Pike series? Ever? That's insane. The whole science fiction world is so creative and making so much money right now, I think your wildest dreams can come true. And so this goes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. Imagine Russell T Davies either steps back and takes a supervisory role or steps back altogether and lets somebody else take over. But Russell T Davies seemed to think that what he was doing back in 2007 is something that Doctor Who should be doing now. Maybe that's part of the reason for bringing Bad Wolf in. Matt was sort of alluding to that earlier. I mean, we've sort of covered this, but just very briefly then. Would we like to see Doctor Who in sort of a couple of movies, a couple of series a year, in sort of spin-offs, some with the Doctor, some with an older Doctor, whatever? Does that appeal to us, Lee?
Yeah, it does appeal, actually. I think that this echoes the thing I mentioned right at the beginning of the podcast, that the landscape is changing, and he literally has just said exactly what the landscape could hold for Doctor Who if it's played right. We haven't got Marvel money, we haven't got the same kind of money as HBO and all these other big massive companies, but who knows how Doctor Who may be received if it's done in a particular way that becomes a globally interesting program, as opposed to just a few countries. But maybe it'll just take it. You need to crack America again. Maybe we could crack America with Doctor Who, and that will suddenly allow it to expand and become this incredible universe, which you can. Yeah, I mean, Doctor Who's universe is huge. The Nyssa Adventures. No, I wouldn't watch that. But everything else I might do.
It'd be like Grey's Anatomy, but in a leper colony, wouldn't it?
I've got to say for myself, I slightly think that would be overkill, having multiple series, this sort of thing, these kind of spin-offs. But then again, I think if it happened, I certainly wouldn't turn my nose up at it. Simon, what do you think?
It all depends. It all depends on how it's handled. If you look at the way the Marvel's done their thing, every story is very different in tone and creation, and it's given a very it's given over to people who want to say, right, Loki's got to look like this. It's got to look like a 1940s kind of noir type thing, and it could be done like that, and I don't know why it couldn't, because Doctor Who sees the entire universe and time and space.
This is kind of my point about Davis moving up to sit alongside Tranter and Gardner as the Kevin Feige of the Whoniverse, while other people come in to do these series underneath. And that's kind of what I was talking about there. One of the reasons why I kind of see that as a possibility. Simon, Doctor Who in the kind of Marvel sense, does that work for you?
I would like to see just maybe one good spin-off series take off and just be continuous like Doctor Who is, and not feel like there's a limit to what they can do with them, because there's no reason why not. So it would be nice to see, funny, Casualty in Holby City. So Holby City has only just finished, isn't it, or something like that? But God, that ran and ran and ran. No reason why they couldn't do the same thing with Doctor Who, where Doctor Who could end up running out of steam. Dread the thought, but the other series could carry on. But
my one worry is that Russell T Davies's previous on this is Torchwood, which I, for the most part, didn't very much like.
Yeah. But even Torchwood had, Doctor Who was unique, and it was unique, and even now is still unique. But Torchwood, there was past, with things like the X-Files, and other, series. I suppose you've got Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that, which, mind you, that was after Torchwood, wasn't it? So that's kind of a format which has been done over and over again, and will continue to be done over and over again. But to find something else unique within, a Dalek series, maybe, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, who knows? Matt, Doctor Who Plus?
Yeah, I disagree with Brett almost entirely on this. I don't think they should be looking for an ongoing spin-off. I think they should, and that's not what Marvel are doing at the moment. They're looking for the mini-series they can tell about particular characters. So they tell one miniseries generally, and then they're out, apart from Loki that's going into a second one. But then you give a second one to the ones that catch fire. And I think that's what Doctor Who should approach. Doctor Who should be the ongoing thing. I think JR's just held up a sign saying Doctor 8, and I was going to get onto that my obsession with the idea of a Paul McGann sort of 5-episode miniseries, Time War miniseries, that would work for me. That's something that they could tell a whole story in a limited amount of time. Then the next year they can tell another whole story within a limited amount of time, and then you could get a Dalek series. That would work. But I think if you try to get something like Torchwood, which goes on and on and on, I think then they just diverge from Doctor Who, and you lose that kind of, I don't know, Doctor Who has a particular thing that makes it survivable on a long-term basis. And there's something sad about something trying to go on and on and on. So yeah, I'd be happy to see spin-offs, but sort of mini-series. For kids, on the other hand, I think something that goes on and on and on is a comforting thing. So something like Sarah Jane that comes back year after year, I think that's fine. But on a dramatic, for adults at a dramatic level, I think sort of short-term miniseries.
Oh, well, we know she does children's TV, so Sophie Aldred in a series for children, perfect. Anyway, at the risk of going on well into the second hour, which we're already well within, Tim Ullman says, whatever happens, I'm excited about the immediate future of the show in a way I haven't been in a long, long time. So our final question, before we do a little spoiler bit, are we happy? Are we happy to see Russell T Davies back? For myself, yes, but that is tinged with the notion that although I enjoyed Russell T Davies as Doctor Who at the time, it hasn't, for my money, a lot of it hasn't lived on as well as it did when it was broadcast. So Russell T Davies, to me, I'd kind of like to see a short, snappy bit of Russell T Davies, and then I'd like to see somebody else. So yeah, I'm happy, but it's a qualified happy. Simon.
It's funny to have as I said at the start of the episode, I was surprised at how excited I was, and I was all of a dither. And from the moment I had heard the news, I had things to do, and I couldn't. I had to keep looking at Twitter and stuff because it was that lovely buzzy effect, and the vast majority of the things I was reading was positive, so it was nice. But mixed with that is an element of disappointment that there wasn't somebody else to step up to the mark, that there wasn't somebody visible and sellable enough to take over and everyone to have the same reaction and think, wow, this is going to be really great.
That could happen in 2 years. This could be a short thing, like I said, and it could just be that I think this is, like I said right at the top of this podcast, I think this is more about getting Bad Wolf in the door than it is Russell T Davies, and he's more of a means to an end than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you're saying about music analogies. I just, maybe the way that television is made isn't quite. It's not quite how it was. That's one thing that's changed since 2005. Is I don't think program makers are maybe as visible as they were. If you think about the Marvel series, a lot of these writers, these incredible writers, as we said in the previous episode, the people who've created Loki, I couldn't have told you who those people were before I watched the actual series. So there's people who are out there and they're just not as visible. In much the same way as with music now, you've got to hunt around for the really great, strong artists because people aren't as visible because there's so much choice now, and it's just the way things have worked. So yeah, slight disappointment that we're not seeing somebody completely fresh with a fresh take on it. But equally, if we were going to have somebody come back, get somebody back as creative as Russell T Davies, who I think is in a different place in his head from where he was in 2005, which in itself is something new.
Matt, you're breaking up a bit now. Your internet's finally giving out on us, so keep this brief. Are you happy?
I'm neutral. I'm more excited by the people Russell T Davies is going to work with. So the writers that will connect with the older writers. So if Stephen Moffat will come back maybe for an episode, Mark Gatiss, but also Joy Wilkinson or Ty. I want to see how Russell T Davies mentors the Chibnall writers and brings in new writers. Peter Harness, what will Russell T Davies do? Will he work with Peter Harness? So that opens the kind of the corpus of writers as well. And I think that's more important. I was excited about seeing a new person taking on Doctor Who. This isn't a new person taking on Doctor Who. I'm going to reserve my excitement until I see what actually happens.
Lee, before your visitation happens, are you happy at the news?
I am happy with the news. I'm happy in the fact that I feel like the future has been. Thank you, darling.
The blurred background made it look like a Mike Flanagan ghost story.
Somebody said I was in a prison, so that was my prison food come through. I am happy, and I think like all of you, you've all had really valid things to say. Well done, and I agree with virtually everything you just said. But I think it is about securing the future. He has been passed the ball. He's got the ball. It's a brand new ball that he's going to play with, and he's going to throw it to some other people. But yes, he's going to be the person in the background with two other very, very strong, creative and passionate people who love this series, and it's going to keep it going. And that's what's going to happen. It's going to it's not going to get rebooted, I don't think, in its story, but creatively and behind the scenes is going to be rebooted in the way that it's made and formatted, and I'm excited. I like it, and I don't think I was more worried about who was going to take it over, and like Simon said, who's strong enough to take it on board, to keep it going and make it make it the Doctor Who that we all love. RTD's just there holding it for a bit, and then he's going to throw it out. He's going to recreate it a little bit and go, right, here's the new format that will run for a good 6 years. Off you go. And I think that's what was needed. And I hope we do get the spin-offs.
Right. Anybody who doesn't want to hear the rumour, you can turn off your podcast, turn off your video feed now, because now we are going to talk about this thing that turned up. It turned up on Gallifrey base, so I'm not going to read it verbatim because I don't think that would be fair to them. Nice one, Lee. Very funny. But I will give you the meat of what was said, because somebody apparently leaked an email, and the contents of the email were to name the person who's going to be the 14th Doctor, and to also suggest some of the things that are going to be happening in the 60th anniversary special. Let's talk about the latter first, because I think that's a brief thing, and then we can get into the idea of who the 14th Doctor might be and leave it with that.
Is this like a reaction? Is this one of those reaction videos then with me and Lee? Because have you read it, Matt?
Matt's read it.
Oh yeah, I don't care about. I asked for it. Any information that
In more ways than
gobble
one.
up information. I don't care about spoilers or where the information comes from.
Before I do, we're still 2 years before this special is going to be on the air. So, I mean, it seems ridiculous that an email would be flying around at this point, naming people who are going to be in
It
the
is.
special. But the converse of that is the logistics of getting a special of this size together, especially with actors who've gone on to have bigger careers. Presumably, you would say to those actors, right, I'm going to be doing this special. We're going to need you in 12 months if you're free. So presumably the contents of this email are about the people who he has already made arrangements to make this special with, potentially. The names of which are David Tennant and Matt Smith, as you'd imagine, Jenna Coleman, Billy Piper, and Catherine Tate. So it's not really a surprise. So if you were making it up that this email existed, those are the names you would have chosen anyway. So I don't intend to stop and talk about that really. I think we should probably move on. But I mean, has anybody got a reaction to that? Does anybody see that as anything other than, oh, a 60th would be a multi-doctor thing, and those actors would be most likely the ones you'd be able to get to be in it?
I mean, that information did make it sound like the email might be cobblers,
Yeah,
only
yeah.
because that sounds exactly like a sort of Gallifrey-based rumor. However, the timeless child thing was leaked before the timeless children was on, and that sounded like cobblers as well, and that was almost true.
And do you
end to end.
remember when I told you that John Barrowman was going to be in series 12, and you said, huh, because we all thought that was bollocks too, and it wasn't.
No.
So who's this Doctor? Who's the 14th Doctor?
Oh,
Right,
now
okay.
Lee can't wait for
Yeah,
spoilers. Look at this.
Get a move on.
Okay, so again, this is casting that doesn't necessarily need to have happened by now, but given that Russell T Davies presumably and Bad Wolf presumably have already been working on this thing for some time, this press release doesn't come at the instant of their, contractual obligations beginning, but they've been brought on board some time ago, and so potentially this person already is. What are you all laughing at now?
Lee's about to have a rectal prolapse. He's so excited about the information.
Just tucking it back in.
So
this is where you sat in the toilet, Lee.
So the person this email names as the 14th Doctor, and I think this would be a genius appointment because I think this is a really brilliant actor who would be absolutely perfect for it, and B, Lee, it's called teasing it out.
I'll tease you out in a minute if you don't get on this.
But I also think this is absolutely the kind of casting that Russell T Davies would do. It's a woman of colour, and I felt sure that after Jodie Whittaker, our next Doctor would be a woman of colour. It's somebody who's worked with Russell T Davies before, and as we said earlier, Russell T Davies only seems to cast people he's worked with as the Doctor, and I think that's a very sensible approach, because if you've worked with somebody, you know whether they're capable of doing this massive role that you want them for. You don't have to find that out. Yes. You don't have to find that out for yourself. And here's the kicker. Tania Miller, I hope I've pronounced that right, from Years and Years, actually said a few months ago on Twitter and in a video that she knows who the next Doctor is. So this casting was made months ago. She knows who the Doctor is, and this woman who is going to be playing the next Doctor Who is somebody that Tania Miller had worked with. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean on a Russell T Davies production, but given what I've already said, then on a Russell T Davies production would heavily be the inference that you would make. And so the name that has been brought up in this apparent leaked email is Lydia West, who's the young woman. Well, Matt, what was the part she played in Years and Years? She played
in Years to Years. She played the daughter who wanted to be transhuman, so was replacing bits of herself with technology, and ended up being pretty much the hero of the piece, the tech expert.
In Stephen Moffat's Dracula, she was in the third episode only as Lucy Westenra, so that was a very different role. I think she's brilliant, frankly, myself. I think she's an astonishing actress. I'm surprised she hasn't been in more things to this point. If she was the 14th Doctor, I don't think I could be happier. Because I tell you, one thing I think that's been missing in Jodie Whittaker's performance, and I don't say this lightly, but with Jodie Whittaker, I've never got the impression that she's playing a character who's been around for hundreds, possibly thousands of years. She hasn't worn that experience on her shoulders. And I don't think that's necessarily a mistake, but I think I would prefer somebody playing the Doctor who does wear that weight on their shoulders. And I think the thing about Lydia West is, despite the fact that she's only 28, she presumably would be approaching 30 by the time she's actually recording Doctor Who. I think she does. I think she does exude that kind of tone. And you could believe that this young woman is somebody who's been around for centuries, for eons even. Lee, what do you think?
It's inspired. It's inspired. She's great. Got good hair as
It's
well.
true.
By the way. Yeah. She's really funky. She's got a great smile. There's a real warmness. There's a naturalness to her, which I think will come if you were to take on the role. It would come out. And I think that's the thing we lost with Jodie Whittaker a bit. She's
got real darkness as well beneath that bubbliness, hasn't she?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is the thing. It's the light and shade that you need to play with as an actor, and it needs to be really believable and not forced. And she does have that kind of energy about her as well. I think she'd be a real laugh. I think it'd be fun to have her in, and RTD and her working together. Yeah, I mean, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I hope that's true. I'll be really disappointed if it's not.
Simon, what do you think, Simon?
I think we as Who fans build up this subconscious thing of when we're watching TV, and if somebody comes on the screen who lights things up and has offers a commanding performance and shows enough of their own personality and vigor and vavavoom to make you think they would make a great Doctor. And I do remember thinking that during It's a Sin, and just thinking, God, she's really great. She can carry this program, and she does for a good amount of It's a Sin. I think she comes out at the end of that, and you feel like she's the central role, whether that's actually the case or not. But it's just the fact that she just does the business, and she looks great, she acts great, and I can totally see it working. So I'd be very happy if this is true.
Matt, how about you?
Well, I think it's a stone cold certainty that she's going to be in the series in some form.
Yeah.
Because Russell T Davies, she's like a totem for Russell T Davies now. I think she's got the charisma to play the Doctor. I think the combination, and I was saying this earlier, the combination of her role in Years and Years and It's a Sin, the contrast between those two roles. And she was the central character in It's a Sin. She's the heart of that series. But that kind of down-to-earth carer character in It's a Sin and the transhuman kind of ethereal tech expert in Years and Years, the combination of those two roles, that is the Doctor. It's a potential Doctor waiting to happen. So I think she's already auditioned for the part in those two series. Whether the email's true or not, she'd be great. And I think she's at a different stage from Jodie Whittaker in her career. It does feel like she's more at that kind of just about Matt Smith, David Tennant period, maybe a little bit further on. She's had these kind of high profile roles, but sort of on the edges of these big series. But again, I think It's a Sin is going to have a big effect on the new series of Doctor Who. I think that's going to be just what's going to happen, just because it's been such a success, critical success, that we'll see a lot of faces from It's a Sin in Doctor Who.
And one final thought then. Lydia West as the Doctor, Ollie Alexander as the companion.
Yeah, Absolutely.
And on that note, I
Oh,
think
can we get a series that's completely named after Pet Shop Boys songs now?
No.
And then the last one's called "What Have We Done to Deserve This?"
oh my sweet lord, there's Matt advertising his book. It is definitely time to sign off.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise I was holding it up, but it's still available, obviously.
It is the Black Archive on the Demons, written by Matt Barber and available anywhere on the internet you care to Google. Until we do all this again, I was JR.
I was Lee.
I was Matt.
And that was Simon destroying his room.
And we will speak again soon.